In this video, I'm going to go through section 7.2, which is a little bit different than what you did at GCSE. But it would be worth reading section 7.1, linear inequalities, or your notes on the IGCSE OneNote shading inequalities as well. So we're using inequalities to problem solve. And inequalities occur naturally in many everyday situations. And I've put 3 different statements. The journey will take between 2 to 3 hours. This can be written if x is the journey, it's going to take anything more than or equal to 2 and less than or equal to 3. So that's an inequality. I spent at least £5 a week on fruit. At least means I could have spent more than £5, but equal, at least equal to. So fruit is bigger than or equal to 5. My test result will be no more than 75%. So test result, no more, that means less than or equal to 75%. So here are some of the statements and their mathematical symbol. At least is bigger than or equal to. At most, smaller than or equal to. More than is simply bigger than, so there's no equal. Less than is the same. No more than is the same as at most, so those two are the same. At most, no more than. No less than is the same as at least. It is a bigger than or equal. Under and over are the same as more than and less than. They don't have an equal sign. So under, and if I use different color here, they're all color coordinated. So let's have a look. A boy decides to buy A, white rabbits, and B, black rabbits. So these are the letters that you are asked to use. A for white rabbits and B for black rabbits. Write the following statements as inequalities. He wants at least 2 black ones. So the black ones is B, and that's at least, so that's bigger than or equal to 2. He wants at least 1 white one. So the white one is an A, so that's A is bigger than or equal to 1. His father says he can have no more than 5 altogether. So he can have a white one and a black one, but together, however many they are, they have to be less than or equal to 5, no more than 5. There, he's allowed to have 5. So it says, graph the inequalities and list the ways he can buy his rabbits. So let's just remember, when we are graphing these inequalities, they are straight lines, and solid lines means that the inequality has an equal. Dotted lines is when the inequality is less than or more than, it doesn't have an equal sign. For add maths, you must shade. For GCSE, it's not necessary. For the IGCSE, sometimes they ask you to put the letter R, if you remember. But for this, you must shade. And you shade the regions that is not required. These are the ones you shade. So I'm going to highlight that. The region not required is the region you shade. And then you label your axes with the appropriate letters. If they don't tell you which letter is X and which letter is Y, specifically which letter is X axis and Y axis, then you label them in alphabetical order. So unless otherwise specified, or it is clear that one variable is dependent on another. X is independent. So the independent variable is X, the dependent variable is Y. Why is it dependent? if I say y is bigger than x plus 2, y, the value of y, depends on what I put in x. So that's why the dependent variable is always on the y-axis. However, for this one, they have not told us anything, and white rabbits and black rabbits are not dependent or independent on each other at all. So I'm going to take it in alphabetical order, which means this is A and this is B. So, very, very, very important. Before you plot anything, you must rearrange to make the equation in terms of your y-axis variable. So B has to be the subject. So I've got B is smaller than or equals 5 minus A. And that is the equation we are going to graph. So firstly, I've got the A is 1. So we get our ruler and we put a line there. Okay. And it says A is bigger than or equal to 1, which means this area is what we want. So I'm going to shade the area smaller than 1, which is the area I don't want. And then the next one was B was bigger than or equal to 2. So here is my B. And so I'm going to maybe make that a bit, there we go, over here. I wanted bigger than 2, so I'm going to shade the area smaller than 2. That's the area I don't want. And then I'm going to shade, I'm going to draw B is smaller than or equal to 5 minus A. So you need to find your X and Y intercepts, and I hope it is clear that this 5 is very important. When A is 0, B is 5, and when B is 0, A is 5. So really your line is going to be from 5 in the y-axis to 5 on the x-axis, and I'm going to draw my line. And looking at the inequality, it is a smaller than. The area I want is smaller than, so I must shade the part bigger than. That's the bit I don't want. So that area here is the area I want. So what are the combinations of rabbits that we can have, and list the ways he can buy his rabbits. So he can have this, and he can have that. Remember, they all have to be whole numbers because we're talking about real things, so they can't be decimals. You can't have 2.1 rabbits. And this one, and this one, and this one as well. So these are all the ways, and if we want to list them, you can list. So you can say this is obviously the white, and that's the black rabbits. So for example, if I just take this one, you have 1 white and 2 black, and it's still smaller than 1 because that gives us 3, so he's meeting that condition. I'm not going to list them all, but if the question said list them all, you would need to list them all. Okay, the next one. Maria is 12 years old. last year she was less than 1/3 of her mother's age at the time, and next year she will be more than 1/3 of her mother's age. What is the age range for her mother now? So this is quite a slightly tricky question because it has several things. Firstly, it has last year, and then it has next year, or so now and last year at least. So we need to work out what's going on. Firstly, what is happening now, which is next year? Maria, M, is 12. What's her mum's? Let's put Maria. She's 12. Her mum, well, we don't know what her mum is, so we're going to say her mum is M. What about last year? We know about last year. Last year, Maria was 11, and her mum was M minus 1. Her mum was a year younger. So that means we have some information about last year. Last year, Maria was 11, and she was less than 1/3 of her mother's age. And of course, remember that word of means multiplication. So 11 is smaller than 1/3 multiplied by M minus 1. And to make things simpler, I don't want to use the fraction, so I'm going to multiply both sides by 3 to get rid of that denominator. So 33 is smaller than M minus 1. So M is bigger than, and if I add 1 to both sides, 34. So I know that her mother has to be older than 34 last year. Last year, her mother was older than 34. Now, we've done last year. That's not it, that's now. We're now going to do next year. So next year, if Maria is 12 now, next year Maria is going to be 13. Her mum is going to be M now plus 1. And I do have some information about next year. She will be more than 1/3 of her mother's age. So Maria is going to be more than 1/3 of her mother's age. And again, I'm going to multiply by 3. So that's 13 times 3 is 39, is bigger than M plus 1. So if I take away 1 from both sides, M is smaller than 38. So really, M is, her mother's age is bigger than 34 and smaller than 38, and there's no equal signs. So the range in terms of years, not thinking of years or months, just years, is 35 to 37. She's bigger than 34, smaller than 38, so she's either 35, 36, or 37. And it says what age range. So it doesn't simply want an inequality, it wants the actual figures. The age range is 35 to 37. So this was a complicated question. You needed to identify the time, now, last year, next year, and you also needed to identify the unknowns, the variables. So identify the unknowns. In that case, we always knew what Maria's age was, but we didn't know what her mother's age was, but we could add one and subtract one because she's either 1 year older or 1 year younger. So let's have a look at this one. At the fair, a ride of the hula hoop costs £2 and one on the big spinner costs £1.50. Oliver has £10 to spend. He has H hula hoop rides and S rides on the big spinner. Use the information above to form 5 inequalities. Okay, so let's have a look. The hula hoop costs £2, but that gives us an equation, not an inequality. However, £2 spent on a hula hoop will have to do with his £10 to spend. So really, that is your main target here. £2 of hula hoop are less than or equal to £10. Oliver cannot spend more than £10. He can spend anything up to or equal to 10. So £2 of hula hoops will have to do, and the £10 will have to do. Therefore, when you give the inequalities, you have to simplify them. So you must simplify the inequalities. Let's put it here. Simplify inequalities. So therefore, he can have up to 5 rides. So maximum 5 rides on the hula hoop. The other bit of information, of course, is the cost of the big spinner, which is the S. So £1.50 on the big spinner is less than or equal to 10. £10 has to make do for that. So if I divide both sides by £1.50, I get less than or equal to 6 2/3. Of course, however, you have to put it in context. This is not just about the numbers, it's about the context. You cannot have 2/3 of a ride, okay? So we can't have 2/3 of a ride. Therefore, let me leave the therefore here. That's my first one. That's my second one. So therefore, I'll put it here. S is smaller than or equal to 6. Not 7, because his £10 won't pay for the 7th ride. So just 6. And then, so that's if he only does hula hoop rides, he can have up to 5 rides. If he only does big spinner rides, he can have up to 6 rides. However, he can also mix and match. He can have some hula hoop and some spinner. The hula hoop is for £2. The big spinner is for £1.50, and still he cannot spend any more than £10. If you have a decimal place, you need to get rid of the decimal. So I'm going to say simplify inequalities, leave as whole numbers. Always, always, always. So I'm going to multiply that by 2 to make it multiply everything by 2. So that's 4h plus 3s is smaller than or equal to 20. So that's 1, 2, 3 inequalities, but they've said 5. And often what they want is for you to state the condition that the hula hoop ride must be bigger than or equal to 0. He definitely is going to go on a hula hoop ride. That's a condition. And the same with the spinner, it must be bigger than or equal to 0. So we are assuming that he is going to go on both at least. That's kind of a minimum expectation. Although we've also accounted for what it would be if he spends all his money on one, we are assuming that he is going on these rides. So, the next question says, illustrate the region satisfied by these inequalities using the horizontal axis for H, so they told us, and the vertical axis for S. So they told us that the vertical axis is for S, which means S has to be the subject. So let's rearrange because we're going to use the FX button for that. So 3S is smaller than 20 minus 4H, which means that S is smaller than 20 minus 4H all over 3. So recognize that this is the y-axis. So that's one thing you can do. Of course, the quick way of finding your coordinates is saying when S equals 0, H equals 5. So that means 5, 0. Remember, this is really y, so don't mix them around. And then when H is 0, so did I mix them around? Yep. So that is 0 and 5. And then when H is 0, we've got S is 6 and 2/3. Yep, so we've got 0 and 6 and 2/3. And then I can start plotting all of that. I'm going to plot those two first, because these are just the x-axis and the y-axis. And this is H, and this is S. So over here and over there. So I've plotted those two. You must plot them all. That's it. And then we want H is smaller than or equal to 5. So H is here. Yep. So let's do that. I think I'll make it a bit bigger. That's it. And I'm shading the bit I don't want. So it is smaller than or equal to 5. I don't want bigger than. And then I've got S is smaller than or equal to 6. So again with S, smaller than or equal to 6. So I want smaller than, so I'm going to shade the bit I don't want, which is the bigger than. And then I want from 5, so from 5 here to 6 and 2/3 there. There we are. And it is also smaller than, which means I don't want the bit bigger than, so I'm gonna shade that in. The bigger than bit is what I don't want. So it's clear now that the bit I want is this one. All of this is the area I want in yellow. And then the next question says, mark with an X all possible combination of rides that satisfy these inequalities. So because all of these lines are solid lines, it means that I can highlight them on the line as well. So let's have a look. This coordinate there, I can do. This, I can do. This one. And this one. All of these. Remember, they have to be whole numbers because these are rides. How many rides can that person go on? You can't have a decimal number or a fraction of a ride. Okay. And this one. And all of these are combination of rides that Oliver can have. And remember, you always shade the region you don't want. So it says, which combination gives a maximum of rides and spends the whole £10? So I want to spend the whole £10. This one, you would spend the whole £10, but this is 5 hula hoops and no big spinner. So potentially that's not the one we want, because it has to be a combination of rides. And spends the whole £10. I've forgotten one. This one here. And that is the one we want as well. So two hula hoop. So 2, 4 is the coordinate we want. 2 hula hoops. Each hula hoop times 2, so that's £8. So it's times £2. And 4 big spinners times 4, and then 4 big spinners, so that is times £1.50, which is 6. So we spend the whole £10. So it says, write the following as inequalities. Use x for the first variable and y for the second variable. So let's have a look. Anne doesn't want to buy any more than twice as many Smarties as Maltesers. So we need to break it down, and I like to start with the inequality. Any more than. She doesn't want to buy any more than. So we're thinking of less than. No more than means less than or equal. No more than is less than or equals. I have Smarties and Maltesers. I'm actually going to get rid of that. We're going to use S and M to make our lives easier. Then we continue reading. Twice as many what? Smarties as Maltesers. So the Smarties has to be less than twice the Maltesers. Anne doesn't want to buy any more than twice as many Smarties. So here's the Smarties. They have to be less than twice the Maltesers. Anne doesn't want to buy any more than twice as many Smarties as the Maltesers. So Smarties is less than 2 times the Maltesers. Peter needs at least, so let's start there, at least. That means bigger than or equal. 3 times as much sand as he does plaster. So the sand, okay, is 3 times the plaster. John doesn't want to buy any more than. That means it's less than or equal. John doesn't want to buy any more than twice as much roses as gardenia. So the roses can't be twice as much as the gardenia. Jenny needs at least 3 times as much red beads to blue beads. So at least means bigger than or equal. 3 times as much red beads to blue beads. So the red has to be more than at least 3 times the blue. Before you start your exercise, I want to just go over a few things so that you do the exercise successfully. Firstly, when choosing your axis scale, because you will need to draw your own graphs and label it, the first thing you need to do is find the x and y intercepts for your diagonal lines. Okay, so you're going to do x equals and find what y is, y equals and find what x is. Okay, and fill in your coordinates. Now, really important that you understand which letter represents the y-axis, the vertical axis, because you may need to rearrange it to understand what the inequality is. So, for example, you may write an inequality where, like this, that might be something you write, okay? And you find it correct in question I. But when you come to shade, you might notice that you might think this is y, but it's not. D is the y-axis. So to be able to work out your equation and what your line looks like, you will actually need to do the following. Divide by 2, divide by 2. So a half a, or a divided by 2, is bigger than or equal to d, which really means d is smaller than or equal half of a, which means that your shading because you want smaller than, you're shading above the line, you're shading bigger than, because you always shade the region you don't want. So make sure in your head you know which letter is Y and which letter is X, and make sure the equation that you plot is rearranged. So rearrange inequalities so that the variable, the letter representing the y-axis is the subject. Really, really, really important. So these are the two things that if you watch out and if you do, you should be successful with exercise 7.2.